All right, so the next one here, the House passes a bill prohibiting normalizing with Syria. So on Wednesday, the House passed a bill that prohibits the U.S. from opening diplomatic relations with the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad and expands harsh sanctions on Syria to prevent other countries from normalizing with Syria. So the Assad regime Anti-Normalization Act passed in a vote of 389 to 32, demonstrating broad bipartisan support for the economic war against Syria. Only 28 Democrats and 4 Republicans voted against the bill. The legislation now heads to the Senate, where I am guessing it will pass. The bill was introduced as a reaction to Arab countries repairing relations with the Assad government and Syria being brought back into the Arab League. Hawks in the U.S. are opposed to Syria's regional integration and are hoping they can prevent it using sanctions under the Caesar Act. So the Caesar Act was implemented in 2020 and allows the U.S. to sanction any individual or entity that does business with the Syrian government. The sanctions are specifically designed to prevent Syria from rebuilding, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken has previously said that it's U.S. policy to oppose the reconstruction of Syria as long as Assad remains in power, and he's not going anywhere. The text of the bill declares that it is U.S. policy, quote, to actively oppose recognition or normalization of relations by other governments with any government of Syria that is led by Bashar al-Assad, including by fully implementing the mandatory primary and secondary sanctions in the Caesar Civilian Protection Act, end quote. So that's what they call it, the Civilian Protection Act, even though these sanctions are having a devastating impact on the civilians living in Syria, in the government-controlled territories. On top of the economic sanctions on Syria, the U.S. also has about 900 troops occupying the eastern portion of the country, where it backs the Kurdish-led SDF and controls oil fields. Recent reports have suggested the U.S. was considering a withdrawal from Syria, as its forces have been under attack since October due to U.S. support for the Israeli slaughter in Gaza. So there was some inklings that the U.S. might be thinking about pulling out, but an SDF commander, which again is the Kurdish group that the U.S. backs, said last week that he received assurances from the U.S. that a withdrawal was not on the table. So the U.S. is telling the Kurds, don't worry, we're not going anywhere. But that doesn't mean that they're not thinking about it. You know, the U.S. has a history of, not being nice to the Kurds, but I haven't really seen any other signs since those initial reports of the U.S. kind of thinking about withdrawing. I think they are probably determined to stay.